Welcome to the Data Slayer podcast, brought to you by the team at Blue.Point Supply Chain Solutions, where insight meets impact. I am your host, Jennifer Doty from Blue.Point, and today we will be discussing data. But first, just a few introductions. Returning from our first episode, we have Anne-Marie Orlando, Keegan Smith, and Sarah Hobbs. And then joining us today, also from Blue.Point, is Cody, who I will let introduce himself and his title briefly before we get started.
My name's Cody Charbonneau. I am the Senior Manager of Analytics for the Blue.Point team. I've been with Blue.Point and Yankee Alliance for 13 years now, so have a very good background and understanding of all the data processes that we do on a monthly basis and whatnot. So yeah, I love all things data, and here we are.
Yep, that's why we have you with us today. You'll be answering all the questions I know I'm going to have. And for our new listeners, I'll have Anne-Marie give a brief description as well of Blue.Point and what we are.
Yeah, so Blue.Point, we are a platform, and we are a data intelligence platform, really, where we focus very clearly on clinical product utilization, working with supply chain, working with clinicians, and really aligning the products that our healthcare facilities are using. And are they adding value to the care of the patients, or are they just adding cost to the hospitals? And how can we identify those opportunities and provide our customers the tools in which to get those savings by decreasing that spend? So.
Keegan, can you give us a little insight into how Blue.Point uses data?
Yeah, Blue.Point uses data. We ask our customers to submit their PO data and issuance data where they can. So from there, we look at categorizing their submitted data into our categories. And we do that by product type and product detail, and then normalize it by their submitted statistics as well. So this helps normalize the data and really give a true view on, where they can then go after potential savings to become the top performer. We have everything to a top performer, top quartile, for those targeted savings that we show in our platform. So it helps give, working with the customer's data, it really helps give a visual understanding of the product mix that they have. And then it helps also us tie that to the clinical best practice. So I'll let Cody go on more about the background and all the ins and outs that him and his team do. But that's how Blue.Point really uses the data that we collect from our customers.
I think the data team is like the Oz behind the curtains, right?
What drives everything, but you don't get to see them very often.
That's right, unless they're thrown into podcast meetings.
That's right. Yeah, so I've always said, the data is the foundation to everything that we do. So if there's, cracks in the data, inaccurate data classifications and whatnot, then it kind of, affects everything that we do, and, it affects the savings opportunity. So it's really, really important that, initially we do ensure that our data files that we do collect from our facilities are accurate and meet all of our specific requirements. So I can kind of just go through a high level overview of that process and why it's so important to establish that initial data feed with our facility. So as Keegan mentioned, we do collect PO data, and in some instances where we can, we do collect issuance data. So PO data, is kind of, everyone kind of sends that just because it's, readily available. And it gives us, that high level overview of what facilities are purchasing on a monthly basis. Where we do try to collect issuance data is when there's a lot of items that go to inventory locations. So the issuance data allows us to see down to the department level of where those inventory items are getting used. So this is, especially important when we're looking at, utilization. So we can see which down to the department, which who's using, this many exam gloves versus if we only use the PO data, we would just see it as goes to inventory, so we can't really tell. So when we combine the PO and issuance, it gives us the full picture of what the facility is doing, and it allows Amory and her team and the facility to see deeper into what they're purchasing or what they're using, I should say. So establishing that initial data collection with the facility and ensuring those files are set up for future submissions is especially important to ensure that everything going forward remains accurate, and so that we can move forward without any inconsistencies and inaccuracies. So once that initial collection has been finalized, then ongoing, it's just maintenance and monthly data collections, which are much smoother because, like I said, the files have been set up and finalized. So from there, our team cleanses the data on a monthly basis. We run the data through our matching process, which looks at lines of data every which way to ensure that we're capturing new items that facility is purchasing, whether facility purchased from a new vendor, we capture that as well. So we've really evolved over the course of 10 plus years, in ensuring that we've tweaked our process along the way to ensure that we do capture all those items and and make sure that items aren't being included that shouldn't be and whatnot. And the whole team has been played a huge part in that role. So from there, our team of analysts reviews the matching results and cleanse the data, perform a lot of research on the items to ensure that they belong in the category and whatnot. So it's a lot of lines to look at. We can look at anywhere from a couple 100,000 to a couple million, depending on the onboard of the facility. So it's like I said, over the course of the years, we've become a lot more efficient in our process. So
what I think is unique about it is that we are nimble enough to work with our customers on that data acquisition, where we've had customers and still do have customers who, instead of using PO data, want to use invoice data, right? Because there could be sometimes a difference, a variation there, right? And the other piece to that is that we have customers that sometimes will say, you know what, I may not want to look at my offsites. We have a lot of physician offices. And so Cody and his team are able to cut out those particular sites so that maybe we don't want to see all those doctor offices or those ambulatory care centers or those urgent care centers that fall under that larger corporate umbrella. And then we have other facilities who say, I really want to know what my ambulatory surgery centers are buying. So please include them. And so then we have others who want to see that spend, and we're able to provide that service depending on what they want to see in their tool, what kind of data they want to see. So and Cody and his team are really good at making sure that we're customizing that for them.
Right, and working and making this data also presentable, with the platform, because doing all this work behind the scenes, we can then work with our customers to make sure that they're seeing only what they need to see or want to see.
Exactly, exactly. And everyone's a little bit different, you know. Their data feeds can vary a little bit, or sometimes a lot. And it's really nice to be able to say, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, you want to see it this way? Sure, sure. We can work on that.
And we're talking like value analysis teams, right? And supply chain teams like
Yep.
that are okay.
Yep.
But there's also who else would benefit besides, in the long run, the patient from seeing all this data. I don't know if Sarah, your experience coming as the newest member to Blue.Point and coming straight from, being, front and center on the floor as a nurse, how did you deal with data?
It's funny because you speak all different languages in healthcare, right? And that the one commonality is that data. That data drives the healthcare, right? But we all totally use it differently. As a nurse at the bedside, I would rely on real-time vitals, right? You're looking at vitals, labs, and all of that for all the individual patients. You're very rarely thinking about how much this 4x4 dressing costs. But you're not supposed to do that. That's why there's supply chain there to kind of help with that. Value analysis in the broader, so you have the nurse at the bedside, if you think of it in an ecosystem, right? You have the nurse at the bedside that's in the micro level, right? And then value analysis brings it out to, let's say, the mid-level of what we're looking at hospital-wide. We're drawing that broader view. We're looking at the cost, at the product performance, at the outcomes, trying to balance that quality and the expense across the entire hospital. And then you add that with Blue.Point, which is a completely different language, right? But it grows on a bigger ecosystem level, right? Into like the macro of the entire system. We're using all of that complex data that Cody and Keegan are pulling together and classifying for us and making it readable for the nurse at the bedside. But
right.
Then using that platform and spotting those trends and seeing those variations very quickly in the graphs and in the action plans that you can see, which then drives that strategic savings across the entire system. So that's kind of like, I see different languages, but you think of it in an ecosystem. So you have the micro level, the mid level, and then that macro level. And so driving it through the entire system is really gives you that big picture transformation.
Yeah, I think I've seen, and I know probably many of you have seen that that picture of the Legos where the bricks are all scattered everywhere, right? And that's like data. And then you take those bricks and you may organize them by color, but they're still in piles, right? And then you kind of stack them, right? So they look a little neater. And then all of a sudden you have this house, right? and I think data is like that, right? All those different pieces of data that are coming in, right? So whether it's invoice, it's PO, it's pricing, it's the department level data, it's the vendor they're purchasing from, it's the manufacturers they're using. And then on top of that, we add in that layer of product types and product details really group them by clinical functionalities, clinical equivalents, and help tell that story, right? So help build that house so that someone without, extensive data analytic skills, like that bedside nurse, can look at it and say, oh, wow, that doesn't look right. That door is crooked, right? Or maybe I have too many doors to choose from, right? I think there's, when we look at clinical product utilization, I think a lot of that, yes, it's standardizing to the manufacturer or, whatever, but it's beyond that. It's really that data helps us identify those items where we have overlapping and multiple clinical equivalents. And so in a product type, is it, feasible to have 20 or 85 choices of that same type of product? And from an end user, I know, walking into that room and trying to make those decisions of which one am I going to use, and then layer that with which one should I use for this patient? What does this patient have, or what does this patient need that this product can, fit that need? And how do I make that decision quickly, efficiently, and not suffer from like a decision fatigue process, sure. Or have that those products be wasted or overused, underused. And so I love that Lego story, because it really tells how the team can take that data and make it understandable to everyone throughout the organization.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same data. It's just in a lot of different lenses, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's where Blue.Point can really add value, because we have taken it and organized it in such a unique way that, makes it that much more accessible and easy to understand.
Exactly. And people are visual, I think the platform adds that piece to it, where it's not just an Excel spreadsheet. Yes, knowing the SKUs are important, right? At the end of the day, if you're going to work on the project, you need to understand the SKUs. You need to understand the research behind the decisions that you're going to be making, right? So if you're looking at IVs, what is some of the clinical guidelines I need to understand? And so that's all in the tool. But what really is helps us in that is the platform itself, because it helps you visualize that data in a way that's, again, it's so easy to see that, wow, that's a standout. Wow, why is that different? And it's so simple, but yet so impactful and powerful.
Yeah. And for anyone who is listening and interested in seeing this platform, we will have links to our website in the description, so you can go and sign up for a demo, so we can go ahead and show you what we're talking about. So that is definitely going to be in the description, depending on where you're listening or watching this podcast. Any final words about data that we want to share?
Words. Here's the thing. I think from a nursing, I'll say from a nursing perspective, going from that bedside nurse into a value analysis role or a supply chain role, or having anything to do with the products, or I think there's a lack of comfort at times with manipulating data, looking at tables, looking in and interpreting data. And for you at the facility, if that is something that you identify that you have a shortfall on, I want to say, don't hesitate to reach out to someone in your organization and say, you know what, can you help me understand how to make this better, right? How to make this so I can understand it better, more easily. If it's Excel is your choice, right? I think a lot of people are comfortable with that these days, but there are a lot of people who aren't. How can we, outside of a platform like Blue.Point, don't be afraid to go and get some education on that, right? There's a lot of classes, a lot of online tutorials. And I just have to say that from the nursing perspective, that sometimes we need to advocate for ourselves, because we're put in some of these positions where suddenly we're in charge of this data set, and it's, how do we operationalize that? How do we interpret it? How do we know what to do with it? And, if you don't have a platform like Blue.Point, and you don't have the clinicians at Blue.Point to help guide you and help kind of hand you that packet of what to do, and you're on your own, definitely reach out, get a mentor, and don't be afraid to ask questions. There will be someone in your facility. Most facilities do have analytics as, someone who you could reach out to and say, hey, walk me through this. Help me understand this. And so that's all I wanted to say for the clinicians out there, that if you don't have a platform like this, ask for help. And if you're in charge of data and you need to interpret. So.
Good point. Thank you, Anne-Marie. All right. Well, I think that is a wrap on episode 2, data. Thank you for joining us today. Please like and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to your favorite podcast so that you will be informed the next time we have an episode air. Again, more information will be available in description to all our social media and website links. And lastly, remember, best practice doesn't have to cost more when you slay your data with Blue.Point. So until next time, bye.
Bye.
Not bad.
And the cat butt
That was
cameo.
hysterical.
So this is like a curse. It's gonna follow all of us. Like someone,
Hilarious.
I'll have to lock her in a room next time, and hopefully she doesn't meow too loud.
Awesome.